It also will matter if the questions are complete. Consider these two questions. Should the government provide adequate housing to all? Or, should the government provide adequate housing to all if neglecting to do so will leave people homeless? A less complete question and a more complete question. You will get different kinds of answers to the question that's incomplete and more complete. And it also depends whether questions are asked open-ended or closed. You get a different response saying the question, should the government provide adequate housing? Or asking the question, what should the government provide to the citizens? The open-ended question, you might find relatively few people saying that the government should provide adequate housing. Now, one kind of poll that I haven't mentioned, it's fascinating, it's commonly used now, you ought to understand it. The term is a push poll. Now, a push poll is not designed to collect information about public opinion. A push poll is designed to influence public opinion itself. And it's used typically by political campaigns to inject negative views about their opponent or bad images of a policy issue, and that the questions are asked in ways to persuade voters of one thing or another rather than to collect data from them. And be suspicious of those. It's really kind of a deceitful practice because the poll results are never even issued because the point is not to collect information but to shape it. Okay, when we're done collecting information, and let's assume that we have taken a couple polls, one of the things that we ought to consider is how do different parts of the American public respond to different kinds of political questions. There are what we call cleavages in American popular opinion. That is, cleavages are differences within groups about how they respond to issues. So let's consider one specific question that was asked in the early 90s. Should abortions be legal under any circumstances was asked to a large number of American citizens. And we find differences in the results based on some of the major cleavages in American society: age, gender, education, and race. So that when you look at age, over 30% of the youngest group, those aged 18 to 29, believe abortion should be legal under all circumstances, but only about 20% of the elderly believe that abortion should be legal always. So differences in age, cleavages in age based on the abortion issue. Similarly, men and women differ somewhat in their views about whether abortion should be legal or not. Especially striking when you see differences based on education, that those with less than a high school education are least sympathetic to abortion rights. Those with college education are most sympathetic. Also, there are racial differences. Whites have much more support for legal abortions, over 30%, than blacks do. African Americans, only about 2 out of 10 support abortion under all circumstances, abortion rights under all circumstances. So cleavages based on race, education, gender, and age. You'll notice I'm not giving you a margin of error here or confidence interval. You ought to ask what it is. How confident can we be in these results? I'll tell you, I don't know, but we should know if we're going to accurately evaluate information like this. Okay, we collect information about public opinion, and politicians use it in their policy debates. They use it to shape issues, they use it to make decisions, and it can influence the outcome of those debates. Let me give you an example. In 1994, Republicans take over the Congress. The Republicans have their extensive polling data, which suggests that the American public believes that the national government spends too much money and should cut back its programs. A lot of support for that among the public. President Clinton had somewhat different polling results. Although he found that the public wanted less government spending in the abstract, if you ask them about the individual spending programs, he found that there's a lot of support for the biggest programs the government spends money on. So when the Congress passed legislation cutting the government spending, but cutting those specific programs, President Clinton repeatedly vetoed them. There was budget deadlock. The government ultimately was shut down for a couple weeks while these issues were resolved. While they were trying to resolve them, President Clinton went to the public and said, if those Republicans cut these programs, you'll be losing the kinds of things that you value. You'll be losing support for the kinds of programs that serve you from the government. And President Clinton used the public opinion to mobilize the public to oppose the congressional Republicans and to increase the size of those programs. The Republicans lost. Clinton used that public opinion effectively to shape the debate and frame the decisions and ultimately to ensure that the programs were not cut. So we collect information from the public. We better do it right. We better get data that are accurate. We better construct questions that accurately reflect the views of the public. And then we can use those, and politicians will use them, to shape debates and to make the decisions about the programs that most intimately affect the American public.